So I quickly wanted to talk about this because it's one of those things where everyone on the internet is just, it's uproar everywhere. Everybody's talking about it and addressing it in their own videos and their own opinion, their own reaction regarding like the overall Nintendo Switch 2 opinion about the whole situation we'll get into that in a minute, but it seems that I thought I'd basically give my point of view or my opinion on the matter, based on what was going on. And I knew I would make like a follow-up video eventually regarding, the whole drama that's been going on with Nintendo and the whole, this whole debacle essentially. But anyways, um, but I do want to bring up my perspective on the whole thing because I had some time to formulate it and, give also my small take on like the direct and what was going on and my impressions of it as well. So we'll get into that in a minute. So my thoughts about the Nintendo Direct overall. I enjoyed it. In fact, I've expressed many times during the Direct that was probably like, if I were to give it a rating in terms of like, a tier, I would say it's probably about an S tier, maybe double S tier. I know I kind of was overreacting where I was basically hyping it as a Nintendo fan, like going into the midst of just how crazy all these announcements were and like some announcements that were just like things that fans have been wanting for a very long time, and I've been very vocal about some of the things that they added that I saw that were improvements for the Switch 2, which I thought to be a huge thing. But anyways, getting back into what we're talking about here, um, overall I thought it was great, and towards the end those were some massive announcements, and I mentioned before that the last a few days ago, like with the last Switch 1 Direct, it did feel a bit mediocre, but I feel like that was more of the appetizer before we got, the big announcement that, with all these new games being addressed and like, the new console that we're getting, it was really cool. It was like a bit of a throwback to like the Switch 1 when it came out. But anyways, going on with this whole situation. And by the way, this is unscripted. This is just me improvising with my thoughts about it on the situation. Um, I thought the direct was really good, was really solid. Some great announcements that we had. Going into the thing that has had everybody upset and very angry has to be the pricing of the Nintendo Switch 2, and that was the one thing that came off to me very odd. Is that they were very like not vague, but they were very scarce about being very careful not to mention, or not even mention, but like just not the absence of bringing up anything about the price for the Switch 2, which is something that if you go and watch my reaction video, I point that out saying, like what's the price for it? I mean, we knew at the very end of the video there was going to be a release date, which was June 5th, and I mentioned that too, but being able to know how much it was going to cost, because a lot of people were basically not leaks, but people were mentioning and kind of getting general ideas of how much it was going to be. We all thought it was going to be close to about $400, being the OLED model, being basically $350. So looking at the Switch OLED, or not the Switch OLED, my bad, the Switch 2, we all had a general idea that it was going to be around $400 at the most, but for it to be 499, or I believe it was for 99.99, I believe, like close to $500, and that's not counting tax, or maybe the price varying depending on where you live, like where you are around the world. Excuse me, being maybe perhaps even more expensive. So, but it being about, I would say being around 499 or 99, I feel like the price of the Switch itself isn't really what the issue is. And I know that there's a lot of people that are like, it's on the pricey side, which, I get, but I understand. But when you compare it to when the PS5 Pro was announced with like the optical disc drive and extra storage for it, I mean, that was like, we're heading into like Neo Geo like price ranges, like almost like with PC hardware, getting about a mid to high end, PC like setup, like pre-built. And when you combine that into that, that is very expensive. And for a family with like, kids who want to play the newest, the latest Mario Kart or the latest Mario Party, it is a bit heartbreaking on that side, I would say. But um, another thing is just like it's not really the issue isn't really the console being expensive. It has more or less to do with of course something happened in our world with our economics. I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of that had caused the price, increase with, the economy, with what's going on with the price ranges with games. I mean, games went from being about $60 to the price increase now being up to 70, which is a little bit of a, small pill to swallow for some people. But Nintendo being the company to really experience that massive increase of like, you know, far passing, $70 is why a lot of people are upset. And I have been hearing a few theories as to why Nintendo was very hesitant, or rather the lack thereof mentioning it during the direct. And I feel like, and I had some time to actually talk to my partner, the one that was in the video with me when I was reacting to it, about my own theory as well as like my groups and like my friends in the server. I think it has to do, in my point of view, and I could be wrong. It seems like Nintendo knew that by mentioning the price, maybe let's say hypothetically midway through the video, or maybe like just giving the prices of one of their new Switch titles. I feel like if announcing, it being $80 or maybe, being $90 including tax with like Mario Kart 2 or sorry, Mario Kart World, I feel like that would have been a huge like turnoff or a huge giveaway. Like that would have been a huge turnoff to a lot of people, taking away from a lot of the fun and a lot of like the excitement and hype of this presentation, this event. And I know for a fact that it would have been more a matter of, these games that we've been asking for, like a new, Kirby Air Ride, or, a new, we're getting more gameplay about, more showcasing Pokemon gameplay, or even Metroid Prime 4. And you're seeing all these really hyped, like, Mario Kart World, like these really anticipated games that people are really looking forward to seeing. And now the fact that we know how much they were, and if we were to know how much they were during the presentation and that information was given out, that would have been a huge turnoff to a lot of people. And that would have removed and depleted a lot of the excitement and hype, because it would go into, at least in my perspective, it would go from, oh wow, we're super excited because we're, there's a new Mario Kart and look at all the new features and like this and that, to, yay, now we have to pay $90, for this shit. And understandably, that is why a lot of people are angry and why they have a reason to be upset about this type of a situation. Because, and especially for the little kids, or, the families, that like to play these games with their children, or, son or daughters, with like them wanting to play the latest Mario Party, them wanting to play the new Mario, all the latest Nintendo games, and I understand that completely. I do think it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow, but I wouldn't really say that the price range of the console itself, with how it's, you have the better processing, you have better frame rate, you have HDR enabled, you also have, like up to 120 frames per second. You have a lot of you have more competent hardware. And with it being more competent hardware, I think that's more justifiable for the price range that we have for the Nintendo Switch 2. I feel like, in my opinion. Um, because if you go to the Switch 2 website, and this is why I have this open, and you can see it's available, you know, I mean, it's right around the corner. I mean, the 5th of, it's going to be a summer release. But then when you look at the Switch 2 bundle, and I'm hearing a lot of people say this, where the Nintendo Switch 2 plus Mario Kart World bundle is up to $500, and I think including tax, I mean, this is going, with including tax, with like the, triple digits, I mean, that is a lot of money to spend. But I think it's justifiable, especially with the bundle. If you get the game by itself, or sorry, if you get just a console included with by itself, you do get $449.99. Also, another thing that's interesting is that, um, the Joy-Con as a pair, from what I heard, because we knew all about the pricing. We found out all about the pricing after the direct. As a pair, the Joy-Con are about $90 when I thought that they were expensive, with the Switch 1 Joy-Con being about $70. I mean, they were on the pricier side for how much tech was really put into the hardware of the controller itself. And then that's including like the Pro controller, which God knows how much it is, because I know that initially it was 70 for the Switch 1 Pro controller, which I don't even think is compatible. It can't be compatible with the Switch 2, as we know. I just think it's very expensive. I even remember telling my parents about the price range after the direct for these games, being like, hey, I mean, Nintendo games are going up in price, and you're gonna have to pay essentially $90, almost 100 with like tax included, like I mentioned already, for like Mario Kart. And I find it very odd that Donkey Kong Bonanza is this game is about $70, which is about the average. I will not say average, but like the increased price range for modern releases. Like I give Mortal Kombat 1, maybe the latest Call of Duty. I think Tekken 8 as well, and also the upcoming Doom in the Dark Ages, all being about, I checked too, being about $70, which is crazy. Um, and understandably, like that's a lot of money, and for you to have to buy, these games can be like at that price can be very, is understandably upsetting a lot of people. And I remember watching the Nintendo Treehouse event showcasing gameplay for Donkey Kong Bonanza and Metroid Prime 4, which I believe we're getting more Treehouse gameplay of Metroid Beyond, I think tomorrow, I believe. I'm not really sure, technically today. Um, but we'll have to wait and see. And then the one thing that I did notice that was a bit of a red flag to me was how when it came to the upgrade premium package. And I remember in my direct, if you go back and watch the direct of my reaction, I meant to say, you can hear me say to my partner that, so we have to essentially, are we buying the game twice? Because, I mean, when it comes to Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom or any of your Switch 1 games being backwards compatible, we all have the suspicion that we knew they were going to be backwards compatible, but when it came to being played on more competent hardware, was it going to be like, are we going to have to pay a fee or buy the game again to have them be upgraded? And it seems like we are, but to justify that, to add more value into people doing this, they're adding like almost an expansion to it, like with Mario Party Jamboree TV. And then the also like the one that got me excited was the Kirby Forgotten Land expansion as well. And that looked interesting, I mean, to me. And it seems like we don't know the price for that either, but it seemed to me like that was what basically a lot of people were talking about. And I felt like, so are we going to have to buy the game a second time? And it seems like for just touch up upgrades, as in like just the frame rate being more improved and, having better resolutions and textures for that, it seems like those, like, they explained that if you were an expansion member, it's free of charge for Tears of the Kingdom and the Breath of the Wild upgrade to the Switch 2, which I thought was good. And I feel like my theory, the games that, because I don't know much about this, the games that include extra content alongside the upgrade, like Mario Party Jamboree as well as Kirby and the Forgotten Land, are going to have a price to it. But it's interesting how you have to be a expansion member for this to even be like a free update. So in a way, it does alleviate, because I felt like, in my opinion, if you're gonna have to buy the game twice, even though you bought it originally before, it seems like you're kind of, to get that double dip, you are paying extra, or you're paying it a second time, is what I'm trying to say, and that is understandably a bit cumbersome for some people. And the one thing that I'm hoping isn't, because I want to talk about the game chat really quickly here to kind of close off my opinions about this situation, is that I believe I believe I heard at one point that the game chat will be a separate membership. I'm not sure if it's going to be tied with your Nintendo Switch online membership. So it's not going to be like Xbox Live where it's included within the paid service. It's going to be more of its own separate thing. And that's the thing that kind of bothered me because I feel like if you're already a paid member, the game chat should be available to use right off the gate, like immediately after. Like it should be a part of, you know, this should have been something to be integrated regardless in the beginning, but like for it to be a separate paid thing alongside because you're already paying the membership to be able to play these games online to get through the paywall, if you will. But if you're having to pay a second membership fee to use the game chat, which is basically just Discord integrated with like, um, Nintendo Switch, I don't feel like that would be very fair to the player. I feel like that would be, depending on how much it is. I will say though, it is very generous for Nintendo to basically give a year-long trial to try it in case you don't want to invest or you feel like it's not much of an investment to give it a chance, which I think is a bit generous. And then we go into the fact that the webcam for it, right? And I'm using a webcam right now, and I'm telling you right now that my webcam was a lot cheaper than the price that they're giving for the Switch 1 webcam, or sorry, the Switch 2 webcam. For the resolution, for the frame rate, I mean, it might be better in person because I like to look at it as it's still a work in progress for Nintendo. It's not out yet. Maybe that can change. Maybe they can refine it. You never know, especially with the screen sharing with like how low the FPS was for like game sharing. I mean, that might be an internet situation, but you never know. Um, but yeah, no, it just seems like there's a lot of overpricing and a lot of accessories that you may or may not need. I feel like you don't need it. I feel like a lot of these features are stuff that people may not ever use for the Nintendo Switch. And the biggest thing for me was um, that little it looked interesting to me and very creative. Here's the accessories. I want to go and cover that again while we're talking about it. I did not see this initially. I do find it really funny that they actually are like, hey, the Mario Kart World, the Mario Kart Tour steering wheels are an option because I don't think anybody bought these for when the Switch 1 had their version of these as well. And I remember when those were announced way back in like I think when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was showed, which was kind of cool. And I do think that addressing the webcam, I do think that it being very, not too big of an appliance, not being too like bulky. It's meant to be portable so you can take it with you and use in portable mode. I do think that's pretty convenient and I do like that in some areas. And I do love that it's a universal Type C port, so you don't. It's not like the Nintendo DS. It's not a specific Nintendo only type of cord. It's you can plug in any webcam to it that uses a Type C or Type whatever it is. In case I'm wrong, I believe it's a Type C from what I've been hearing. That Pro controller is very similar except for the C button on the below, which a lot of people are making jokes about, saying it's the cash button. And the biggest mystery of all that I've heard a lot of people say in their reactions as well is what is the use of that button going to be if you do not if you're not subscribed to the voice chat subscription? And I've come up with theories with maybe that can be the capture button, or maybe that's going to be a universal button that will be used for something else. And if you don't have the membership, or maybe you push it and then it just brings up, put in your credit card information, which is what me and my friends were joking about, to like subscribe to the voice chat service if you want to do that, basically. Um, Seems like the dock is somewhat portable. I do like this case setup. I have a Switch. It looks like a tackle box, like for bait, like I'm going fishing. I do have like a Tears of the Kingdom. I'm looking at it right now. Sort of Switch case that does have like a layout like that, but I just love all the individual parts about it. Just all these like accessories that are optional to have. You don't need them, but they're just little quality of life, little attachments that you can get for the system with like the bag and like the all the little things that you may be interested in getting or not. Um, you'd be surprised by how many people never used the Joy-Con straps or even the grip when the Switch 1 came out, and I do use it, but you'd be surprised by how many people are not really interested in using that. Um, the last thing I want to go over, so it seems like the Pro controller will be about $80. I think that is $10 more with the Joy-Con, with the Nintendo Switch 1 Pro controller. And I do love the color palette. I like the grays with the dark. I think that looks really neat. Um, really cool. I want to go over. I'm sure I want to see if we go under games, if we might even find it. Look at that. We have a probably the most underly used. A lot of people are not even aware that this even exists. The Joy-Con 2 charging grip, which was also available for the Switch 1. I don't know anyone who has a Switch, and there's a lot of you out there. Maybe you guys do. I've never seen anyone like own that before, because usually you have your Joy-Con attached. If you want to charge your Joy-Con, you usually have it in handheld mode. And also another fun fact, I found out that the battery life on the Switch 2 is substantially worse, or maybe partially worse than like the Switch 1, which was probably one of the biggest like ups to the Switch was the price, not the price, sorry, the battery life on it, I would say, in a way. We have the Joy-Con 2 strap, we have the wheels. How much are the wheels? $20, I'm assuming for a pair, a set of two, yeah, so that's like 10 each. And then you have the Nintendo Switch camera, which was about $50. This little camera, I don't know how good the quality is. I feel like you can find one that's cheaper that might be better. The Nintendo Switch 2 dock set is $110, which I do find to be. I mean, knowing that it's not just a piece of plastic with like USB ports on it, to know that it's as expensive as it is because there's actually like hardware put into it with like the coolant system. That's crazy. Ultra high speed HDMI cable, yeah, yada yada yada. The Nintendo Switch 2 carrying case and screen protector being about $35. Nintendo Switch all-in-one carrying case being $80. So there's a lot of money that's being sold. There's a lot of you have to take into consideration. You also have to buy extra space for the micro SD card as well. We're going to go into the games because the one thing I want to talk about, I'm sure, will be included here. We're just going to go ahead and look at this really quick. There's Mario Kart Tour, which is a $90 game, by the way. Bonanza is $70. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, I believe it's going to be $70 on the Switch 1. And Switch 2, I do believe it will probably be about, well, it might be up to like the same price of Mario World. Hopefully not. Maybe it'll be about $70 across both Switch 2 and Switch 1 on launch, I believe. Kirby Air Riders, like honestly the most like the impossible sequel that I don't think any of us were expecting. The fact that 20 years later Kirby Sakurai would come back to work on Kirby, that blew my mind. Dragon Drive, which is a game I jokingly made mention that is basically me. I did a lot of wheelchair basketball back in my day when I was about 8 or 9. And this was kind of cool to see. I predicted that within the beginning of every new console, like new life of for every new lifespan of a new Nintendo system, there's usually a new Nintendo IP. And I believe this is like a Nintendo game made in-house, I believe. But you never know. A lot of these are going to be coming out in summer, which I found to be really cool. Here it is. And we have a lot of we have Cyberpunk and Elden Ring and even Street Fighter SF6, and we have some games that were really shocking to for it to be there as well. I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this because I looked at this, and if you look back at my reaction again, I thought this was really, really cool. And the one thing that I completely tuned out that I didn't even hear because of how excited I was of just about overall, announcements and everything, was that somebody actually found, I mean, it was said in the direct, but this is actually a paid subscription. This is a game that you need to pay a service for to in order to play, and I'm just like, for something that seems like it could be like a pack-in title, something that you can, as a tech demo even, like something to use and mess around with, or maybe to learn, like using tutorials, right out of the box in case you don't have a game with the Switch 2, especially with how expensive everything is. I mean, granted, you don't have any Switch 1 games that are backwards compatible. For this to be something you have to pay for on a monthly fee or yearly or whatever it is, just seems kind of like, I don't know. Like, I completely did not hear that in the direct, but I found it to be a bit um just like, why, and a lot of people are also understandably upset about that also, which I can totally understand, and I get that as well. For, like, just basically explaining the inner tech and the hardware of how the Joy-Con functions the way it is. It's really cool. Like, what they're showing here is really, really cool, and I've never seen any other console really do something like this, and it looks really, and it's a neat idea. And to have it set up like it's like an airport terminal, like to make it out to be like a sort of hub with little people running around, I think it's really cool and neat. But for it to be like a subscription based, like paid digital, like for it to be like something like that, it does seem a bit fit, understandably, I have to pay to learn, or pay to use tutorials, essentially is what people were saying. So yeah. But anyways, I mean, preventing this from being as long as it is with my little discussion here, or my thoughts about the whole thing. Overall, it's a bit of a shame that instead of, a lot of the general people being like, this is something we should celebrate, like this is everything that, I Nintendo essentially giving us what we've wanted. I mean, all the issues being somewhat rectified or being answered with the Switch 2 that were in the Switch 1. It is a bit, I mean, Nintendo would have a huge win and everybody would be really celebrating it. There would be a lot of excitement. Like, I can't wait for the Switch 2 to come out. It does seem a bit of an issue. It is a bit saddening for a lot of people to not be really that to be overlooked because of the price range of the Switch 2, in my opinion, which I can totally understand why people are really upset about that. Um, and I mean, in my opinion, will I get a Switch 2 when it comes out? I'm perfectly content with my Switch 1. I've already talked to everybody about it. Generally, it's not really a good idea to really buy consoles day one, knowing that there can be a lot of hardware failures. And I'm really curious to see a lot of people get hands-on with the hardware to really solve, to really answer a lot of the skepticisms that people were having of the Switch too. And I want to see that first before, we sort of dip our feet into it. It's kind of like it. I want to see the early adopters, or the first penguins to go in the water, so to speak, before we see really what happens. In my perspective of it. So, yeah, it is a little bit of a shame though, because there's a lot of really good games here, and there's some stuff that people have been wanting for and asking for a very long time, and the fact that the price range did kind of ruin a little bit of the excitement and the celebration of how cool and how amazing the direct was, with, like, there's a lot to look forward to, with Nintendo and the Switch 2's new lifespan, and all the games coming out for it as well. So, that's, I mean, that's generally my thoughts on the whole situation. That's basically overall what I think of, what's really going to go on with the system. There's a lot of good games coming out for it. I'm generally really excited. A lot of, like, new titles that are not out, like, or even definitive editions. Like, knowing that the hardware is now competent enough is making a lot of the third party companies be like, we can develop for the system now. And we might even see, I mean, it's more often, I mean, it's a very likely chance that we will see the new Doom, Doom the Dark Ages. We might even see Tekken 8. We might even see possibly GTA 6, which I hope to God isn't $100 fucking dollars. when it comes out due to the whole price increase. And the biggest thing that a lot of people were afraid of is if this sells and it does very well, which I want Nintendo to do well, but if if these prices are making people purchase this hardware in the games, hopefully other third-party companies are not going to look at that and go, "Huh, well, you know what? Maybe maybe we could do that and maybe we could, charge, you know, fucking $500 for, you know, essentially GTA when, that Kirby game is being sold for 90. It's just like, I mean, I fucking hope not.